recording now. Okay, any other question or comment? Okay, so let me close my chat now that I have 23 students here, which is great, participants. Okay, so before I share with you my Word document so I can pick up where I left, remember, we are in the section of income distribution and poverty in Latin America. So we already covered the first section that deals with poverty. And the next section is going to be about income inequality. So before we jump to the second part, last class, I didn't have enough time to share a video with you. And I think it's important for us to watch this video together because I really want to see your reaction and actually have some, brief conversation about that. This video I am going to show you is around 8 minutes long. Was mainly produced by a very famous Peruvian economist. His name is Hernando de Soto. Very interesting guy. He now, I don't know if he's retired by now, but a couple of years ago, he had this think tank at Columbia University. He's a very wealthy person, but very concerned about poverty issues all throughout the world, but specifically Latin America. And obviously, since he's a native of Peru, he's specializing in Peruvian issues. So this Peruvian economist also wrote a very famous book that I don't remember if I have mentioned here or not. The name of the book is The Mystery of Capital. And the basic idea of the book is this. The basic question, why is that capitalism and neoliberal policies seem to be working so well in many countries and they are failing so badly in most of the developing world? And one of the answers that Hernando de Soto provides in this book has to do with property rights. And as you probably remember from other econ and poli-science classes and perhaps other classes, property rights are very important. And by property rights, we mean basically defining who owns what. So let me give you the example that De Soto provides. In the US, in developed rich nations, if you want to open up a business or you want to grow, expand your business, you can go to the bank and ask for a loan. You borrow money and you present the title of your property or your mortgage. There is a way to prove that you have a collateral in case you cannot pay anymore. But in the case of Latin America, specifically some really very poor countries, many of these people cannot do that. Not only because they lack the title of property for a piece of land, but also because in many cases, they don't have a legal identity. You probably are going to be surprised by this, but in many countries in Latin America, even today, we take for granted that we have a social security number, that we have a birth certificate, that you have a driver's license, that you have all of these things that for us is like flipping the switch when you walk into a room and there is light. Now, in many Latin American countries, the government doesn't know that you exist. There is no record of you being born because there is no birth certificate. You never went to school. There is no ID, nothing. So how a bank is going to make a loan to you when officially speaking, you don't even exist, right? So property rights is not just about properties per se, buildings and homes and cars. It's in general, all this official documentation that is very important in a capitalist system, because that's how we, prove that we own something or that we are who we say we are. I can tell you I am Antonio Avalos, but why would you believe me? Well, you trust the system that Fresno State went through the process. Actually, you perhaps just don't know this, but to become a professor here, you have to do a background check. and they check a lot of things before they let you teach at this institute, which is great. I mean, it's really good. Safety, making sure that, again, you are who you are. But the point is, in Latin American countries, especially in remote rural areas, the world is completely different. And now that many of these people move to the cities after this migration period, remember during the ISI industrialization times, you have millions and millions of people in the cities with the same problem. There is no identity, proof of identity. They have no way to prove that they are who they say they are. No title of property, nothing. So anyway, that's a very interesting book. I have it in my office. If anybody wants to borrow it, or you can buy it online. It's a very interesting book. Anyway, I'm gonna play the video and then we can comment about this, okay? So let's see, share screen, share sound, optimize for video clip. Let's see how that works, okay? Here I go.
Make no mistake about it, capitalism is failing for most of the people in the world today because its immediate or most recent enemy, not its only enemy, but its most recent enemy called communism collapsed. And all the world said, good, we accept the capitalist system, and it isn't working in the majority of the world. "40 years ago, people started massively moving towards cities and towns, all throughout the third world. When they were out in the countryside, they could only really do one thing, which is be farmers. Now, all of a sudden, the possibility of diversifying and actually having a gratifying life has increased. We all talk about a global economy and a global world, and yet we know very little about how 2/3 of the world lives and what it's up to. And it is important that we get acquainted with them because they are the majority of the world's population. There is really no difference between the rich and the poor. They all want the same things. The first thing these people want are homes, or they want constructions in which they can be sheltered when they do business. They want infrastructure, they want schools, they want shops. They want exactly the same things. They've migrated. This is where they want to be. This is where they realize subconsciously that the division of labor is going to work in their favor, and either we give them a stake in the game, or they're going to bring down the existing game as many times as necessary until they're able to participate in it. Wherever you go in the developing world, you will see lots of children. In the 18th and 19th century, the Industrial Revolution began in Europe. And lots of little kids like this, the Oliver Twists of the Europeans, came into the cities with the purpose of joining the broader, wealthier economy. And just like Oliver Twist, they've come here to be part of the capitalist game. And they're watching TV, and they're looking at newspapers, they're looking just over the hill, and now they know how you live in the West, and they want that. What a market economy is about, what a capitalist system is about, is people that cluster together spontaneously to try and divide labor among themselves in such a way as to be more productive. They get together like they're doing here. First of all, very precarious huts, as you can see. built sometimes with debris, with garbage, that eventually one day will become houses, like houses anywhere else. But that's the way capitalism begins. Obviously, if poor people and the excluded have migrated towards the cities and the towns, it's because they want to be included in the system. But they haven't been able to be included, among other things, because they found a large paper wall that obstructs their entry. In other words, the legal systems are simply unfriendly to poor people. Legal complications are what history is made of. Simplification is relatively recent. 2/3 of the world's population, 4 billion people, are locked out of the capitalist system. They want to participate, but they can't, because participating means being able to make safe contracts with everybody, being able to get credit, having an identity that will be recognized on a broad scale throughout the world, and having the possibility to organize production so that they can enter foreign markets. They can't. So what they've done is created their own legal system, what we call the extra legal system. That's why we don't term it illegal. Extra legal does not mean lawlessness. It means that they're outside the formal written legal system, but that they have their own rules, very specific ones, on how to hold on to property, how to differentiate between owners, how to make contracts, how to enforce contracts, how to give credit, how to respect families, how to create families. Extra legal simply means that outside the formal legal system, a new system is being created, made of customs and procedures that people consider legitimate and efficient. Here, what you can see behind me in those buildings, in the high rises, in the glass structures, are what is the minority in any developing or former Soviet Union country. We're the westernized people. We live very much like most of the citizens in the North Atlantic, in the developed countries of Asia. But in fact, we are a minority. We are really the marginals of the country. We are not the mainstream. The fact is that the majority of the people work and live outside the legal system. These people are the engine of growth. Without hardly any assistance from the outside world, they are changing slums into cities. It's these people that produce the wealth. These people have assets. The total value of their homes in Peru is about $80 billion. They've got shops, and they have an identity. There is no way an entrepreneur can really create huge amounts of wealth unless he's got all these tools of the law that we take for granted. And we even forget that most of us didn't have access to them until the 1850s, when in New York, Dudley Smith was the first to make reforms in the world so that you could create a company in the US without an act of Congress. So we've got to understand that either we quickly make capitalism friendly to the majority, or that majority will find an alternative ideology, as it always does. It could be called communism, it could be called fascism, it could be called Al-Qaedism, it could be called castrism. It'll find an alternative because people are governed by ideas. Don't be fooled. Poverty doesn't incite people to terrorism. People get angry and violent, and terrorism grows when people feel excluded. The first way to beat terrorism is make everybody feel that they're part of this society. Bring them in, and we will have less problems with terrorism. You know, the more I think about this film project is really very important, because 2/3 of the world, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Peru to China, actually live like this. This is the challenge. So if you can picture this, put it into your mind, it'll be much easier to take the right policy decisions. Films are very important. You can't understand this unless you really see it.
All right. So the sound for some reason is not great. I couldn't increase the volume. I hope you were able to listen. But any comments, any reaction, guys?
I just wanted to say two of the individuals that I saw in the video that are supposed to be outside of the actual economy, they looked like they had some pretty successful businesses in the which that lady was selling that wheat.
Yeah.
Right, I seen that, and then those two dudes that were doing that propane business that looked actually pretty successful, and those are supposed to be, you know, outside of the economy. That's what they were trying to go with. It's like pretty much just cash business, right? And circulated. Is that right?
That is correct, Sandeep. So this is kind of an introduction to what later we are going to study under the name of the underground informal economy. And here I just wanted to introduce this interesting concept that it's not that these businesses are illegal. They, you know, Hernando de Soto calls them extra legal, outside of the legal system. And by that he means, well, they don't pay corporate income tax. They don't follow the you know, sanitation code, the health code, the labor code, and many other, you know, legalities. But that doesn't mean that they don't have their own legal system. You know, they trust each other. You know, they understand, you know, business management, accounting practices that they have acquired on their own. They didn't go to school. You know, they learn all these things on their own. And yes, for the most part, it's a cash economy, which has huge implications in Latin America, Sandeep, and everybody, because as I said, they don't pay corporate income tax. They don't pay payroll tax. And therefore, when you have a really big informal economy, like in countries such as El Salvador or Nicaragua and others, Honduras, the tax base, the tax revenue collection, which is necessary for the production and provision of public goods and services, is significantly weakened, because, you know, if you have an informal economy that represents 40–30% of your total economy, well, that means that, roughly speaking, you are not generating, you know, 30 or 40% of tax revenue that you could if this business were part of the formal economy. So yeah, I mean, you know, many businesses that are in the, you know, informal economy are very, very successful. And now the challenge is how to move them from the informal to the formal sector, to formalize them. Many of them are, you know, they understand the importance of this, but many of them also say, I don't want to do it because by formalizing my business, my production costs are going to increase. And now I have to pay taxes. Now I have to obey all these different codes, you know, all of these things. Well, that's going to diminish my profit margin. And that's just not attractive to me. So it's a very challenging task to formalize the informal sector, particularly those businesses that are successful. Yeah.
I totally understand what you're saying. You don't think that, like, by formalizing the business, it would be beneficial to them, though, even if profit margin does decrease?
Well, you know, if you think about the benefits in terms of public services and public goods, you know, they would receive more protection from the police forces, you know, being rescued by firefighters in case of a fire, more infrastructure, you know, lighting in the streets, and all of these things. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. But the problem is that for that to happen, you have to convince them all, and individually, you know, they don't see it that way. You know, it's one of those things like that we normally in other classes define as the free rider problem. You are waiting for your neighbor to pay so you don't have to. And everybody's thinking this is taking a similar approach, so that nobody moves, nobody makes a move. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's just that, like, I feel like if they were in the formal economy, you know, even if they have less profit margin, they could be more available to loans to grow their business, right? Other than when you're an all cash business and you don't deposit money into bank accounts, loans are not available.
Well, but guess what? They have developed their own banking system. You know, this is like an extra out of the formal legal system, banking system. So let me give you an idea of how this works. Actually, I have seen this thing in places as close as Fresno and San Francisco with migrants that are defined as the unbanked, because many people that are undocumented here in the Valley, for example, they cannot open up banking accounts and they cannot do many things like we normally do. Anyway, so this is what sometimes they do. They have different names for this, but imagine this is a hypothetical, simple example just to illustrate the point. So imagine that you have 10 families that they know each other, and they say, all right, every week we are going to deposit in this box, say $1,000. So 10 families are depositing $1,000 in this bucket. So every week there is going to be $10,000. Next week is going to be $10,000, and then they do a raffle. So literally pieces of papers from 1 to 10. If you pick piece of paper number 1, the first week you have access to $10,000 to do whatever you want, as long as you commit to pay the next 9 weeks your corresponding $1,000. You know, paper number 2 gets the $10,000 the second week, and so forth. You get the idea? So, and again, this is a very primitive way, just to illustrate my point. But the idea is that they have developed this system of trust where they know each other. They know that they belong to the same class, they are in the same situation. And for the most part, you know, delinquency rates and problems in this type of arrangements are very, very low, because they know that if one fails, everybody collapses. So the trust in this type of arrangements is huge. And again, it's just an illustration of how alternative financing mechanisms have developed over time outside the legal system. Good point. Good point. Yes, David.
If you had to change only one thing in Mexico, would it be the property right, or what would you, if you could only change one thing in Mexico, what would it be?
And the goal being what?
Maximize GDP.
Well, remember, growing the economy is not so tough, David. You know, I think we know the formula to do that. What is really challenging is to make sure that the benefits of that economic growth are spread fairly throughout the population. So if your question is, okay, Professor Avalos, what would you change in Mexico to improve income and wealth distribution? You know, that would be a more interesting question, right? Maybe that's what you had in mind. I don't know. But let's say you did. Let's say you did. It's hard to pinpoint to a single thing, right? But you know, one for sure would be property rights. But I think I would go first to improve as much as possible the investment in human capital. And by this, I mean not just education, but health. You know, when you have a healthier, more educated population, they have a way broader criteria. They have more access to opportunities. The chances of being fooled diminish. The ambition increases. The vision expands. With these two things, healthier and more educated. So I know that human capital is not the silver bullet that is going to solve every single problem, but I think that's one of the main places where I would start, David. Yeah, we are going to talk about education in Latin America later, and I am going to explain in a fuller way what I mean by this, because you are going to see something that is very strange happening in many Latin American countries. Let me give you a preview. There are many private schools, parochial schools, or private education, right? That is normally very expensive, but very good. And public education is free. mostly throughout Latin America. You know, and when I say public education, I mean all the way from, you know, primary school through college. You can go all the way free. The problem with public education in Latin America, including Mexico, is that it's really bad, poor quality. I remember I took probably 6 years of English when I was going through, I am the product of that public education system in Mexico. And I learned zero from, you know, English. You know, I have to go to school to learn English, and well, I'm still learning actually. But the point is, when you get to the college level, there is a limited number of seats, as they are here, you know, at Fresno State, you know, any other institution, public institution. But and there is a an exam that you have to take. So you have children, well, not children, you know, young adults from public high schools competing with those from private high schools. And many of these universities are of very high quality. You know, the National University of Mexico, I mean, they have, you know, microbiology people working with Stanford and Harvard and Germany. It's like super high quality education at the college level. But who gets that education? Well, only the kids that can get to these very competitive spots. And who are these kids? The ones that come from private high schools. That's where good education comes from. So if you are lucky to be able to go to school in the public system, that's great, but you're not going to receive a very good education. And then when you get to the point to go to college, it's going to be very, very challenging for you to land a spot for college, because most of these spots are going to be taken by better educated children that went to private education. So, you know, and you know, we are going to talk about this later, but this is another element that perpetuates inequality, income and wealth inequality, because the access to education is also biased, is skewed, is not equal for everyone. Mm-hmm. Yes, Dylan.
For to speak on education, the disparity between private and public education, you know, if is there much discussion, like, and here in the United States, there's a lot of debate about school vouchers and trying to expand equal access to private schooling for low-income families and whatnot. Is there much discussion like that in Mexico at all?
No, at least not that I am aware of. I mean, I have actually all my relatives and friends live there, and as far as I know, no conversations about that particular topic have been initiated. Think about this, you know, the mentality in many Latin American countries, including Mexico, is that if the government is already spending, you know, billions of dollars or Mexican pesos in the public education system, why would the government spend any more money in other, you know, programs? Now, if, you know, vouchers are coming from private donors, I have not seen that either. You know, the philanthropic spirit and motivation level in many Latin American countries is very different from what we have here. You know, so no, the answer to your question is no, Dylan. That's a good question, though. I don't know. I mean, I know the debate in the US is pretty dense. You know, many people don't believe in the voucher system and all of these things. But I think that the goal, the aim, is to try to equalize, you know, some of the differences. So that would be an interesting conversation to have in many Latin American countries, but it's not happening yet. Nope. Anybody else, guys? Any other comments or questions? Let me look at this other page. That's all I have. Okay, so now let me move on to my PowerPoint or Word document. I am going to start sharing. Okay. So what we are going to do now is to move from poverty to inequality, which again are two very different things. You may have a very poor country, but everybody is so poor that inequality is not an issue, right? Or you may have a very rich country where you have high levels of inequality, right? Anyway, the point is that these two things are different. Latin America, for many years or decades, I should say, enjoys or I shouldn't say enjoy, but has been ranked as the #1 region in the world, registering the largest, highest levels of income and wealth inequality in the world, worse than Africa. And that's what I meant by my previous statement. In Africa, most people are so poor, or some African countries are so poor that everybody is so, so equally poor. Anyway, so to have a better conversation about this, I am going to introduce a very important concept in economics and political economy that is called the Gini coefficient. I forgot the first name of the Italian economist that developed this many years ago, but his last name is Gini. And the Gini coefficient measures the difference between a hypothetical population with all income divided equally and the actual distribution of income in that economy. So, okay, let me explain that. To understand the Gini coefficient, we need to understand the Lorenz curve, all right? So in this chart, what you have, I know some of you have seen this before, so bear with me. I know that some of you have never seen this. We have many non-econ economists in the class. What you have on figure, 11.1, or whatever number that is, the Lorenz curve for Latin American income distribution is the following. So here on the x-axis, what you need to do is to split the population in segments. The typical segmentation is 10. So you are going to have 10 segments called deciles. So the first decile, the second decile, all the way to the 10th. So you are going to sort your population by level of income, right? And then on the y-axis, this one right here, you are going to produce the percentage that that particular decile holds of income. So let me give you this idea. Let's look at actually, let me do this. So I'm looking at this point right here. This first red spot indicates that the first 10% of the population owns 10% of income. If I move to the second one, the first 20% of the population owns 20% of total income. And by income, you can think of a GDP, GNI, or any other thing. You can use Gini coefficient to measure inequality in pretty much anything that can be measured. Let's look at number 5. All right, 50% of the population owns 50% of income. This line right here, the one that goes from 0 to the other extreme of the box, is what we call the line of perfect equality, where the distribution of income is perfect. And by perfect, I mean that if you have $100 and you have 100 people, each person gets $1, right? But anywhere in the world, there is this line of perfect equality doesn't exist in real life. Anywhere in the world, whether you go to the US, to Sweden, to Bolivia, anywhere, you're going to find something very different. Normally, the first 10% of the population, the poorest 10% of the population, are going to be making less than 10%. 20% of the population making less than 10%, and so forth. This line right here, the second line, actually is a curve. That is the Lorenz curve. the actual distribution of income observed in any given population, right? And then, since now you have two lines, the line of perfect equality and the Lorenz curve, you have two areas, area A, this one right here, and area B. So to calculate the Gini coefficient, you actually have a formula. And the formula goes like this. Let me see if I can get this in one shot. All right. So and now I'm switching gears to the section below. Let me move this to green. I'm looking at this one right here. So the Gini coefficient is equal to area A, this whole thing, area A, divided by A plus B, divided by this whole triangle. So essentially what you want to measure is the proportion, let me clear all this mess. The proportion that area A represents of this whole triangle. So the Gini coefficient can run from 0, a perfect distribution, to 1, a totally imperfect distribution where one person accumulates everything. Of course, both extremes don't exist in the world. So anyway, the Gini coefficient is A divided by A plus B. And again, I am not going to ask you to memorize these things, but I think it's important for you to see this at least once in your life. So that if you are reading a paper and it shows, oh, the Gini coefficient, such and such, at least you know what they are talking about, right? So when I wrote these notes, the average Gini coefficient in Latin America was around 53. And for the US was 40. So that clearly shows that the income distribution in the US, although it's getting worse, but that's a different story, historically has been better than the income distribution in the US, in Latin America, because the Gini coefficient in Latin America is typically higher than any other region in the world. You can find references to Gini coefficients all throughout the economic development literature and also the political economy literature, because the Gini coefficient is the standard or one of the standards to measure inequality. The other one is the ratio of the 20 to the 20%, the 20th richest to the 20th poorest, but normally you are going to see Gini coefficients. Anyway, the reason I'm showing you this, and actually just because I'm running out of time, is this. So I am going to cover the things I skip in the recording for Friday. But anyway, here you can see that I am going to use this very quickly right here. You can see that, notice this decline previous to the debt crisis in Latin America. Poverty was going down, both extreme and moderate poverty, but also the Gini coefficient, which is dark blue, the Gini coefficient was going down. So many people interpret this as, wait a second, so the ISI strategy was working. It was a very costly investment because at the end, things went, really bad when they discovered that these strategies were unsustainable and all of the problems that we already saw. And then in 82, there is the debt crisis, and you can see this rebound. You see, now the trend is reversed. It was improving in terms of, okay, poverty is going down, income inequality is down, debt crisis, Washington consensus, neoliberal policies, and boom, now you have that Gini coefficient is going up. Poverty is increasing, both moderate and extreme poverty is increasing. And again, this is partially what, again, explains the reaction in Latin America by new left politicians taking advantage of these realities and also taking advantage of the more democratic systems that have developed in Latin America They won all these spaces. Let me stop. Okay. Let me stop here. Okay, I have 3 more minutes. Any comments, any questions? Yes, Cody.
Yeah, so on Monday when we were talking about the Human Development Index,
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't mention the Gini coefficient, so I was wondering, do they include that in the sort of statistic?
No, Cody, the Human Development Index only includes health, measured as life expectancy, education, and income, but income level, not income distribution. So the idea of the HDI is to improve our understanding of poverty, not inequality. So if you press me, I would say that the HDI should be grouped into poverty indicators, not with inequality ones. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. To me, it's just I was expecting it to include it because sort of poverty and human development sort of seem intertwined. I mean, it's kind of something you can't really avoid in terms of the standard of living if there's so many poor people.
I agree, but listen to yourself. You said poverty and development. Yeah, HDI and poverty go hand in hand. Inequality is a different process and a different way of looking at things. And that's why we use different measurements like Gini. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anybody else, guys? Any other comment or question? David, it looks like you have something on your mind. You're about to say something.
No, I'm good for now.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, I have 1 minute, so I think I'm gonna stop now. And like I said, I am going to cover the things I didn't have time on the recording for Friday. So, please make sure to watch it. Otherwise, well, you're going to miss that material. So I will see you once again live on Monday, guys. So thank you, everyone. I will see you soon. I'm gonna stop recording.